Mr. Chomsky, we're talking there about American terror, and I think you make a very accurate observation that we are responsible for what we do, but hardly responsible for what other people do, except insofar as we are in a position to influence them.
That's right.
For instance, if there is a mass starvation in Biafra, even though we did not cause it, there is a sense in which we are responsible if we don't do something to attempt to alleviate it. Now, by the same token, if we are prepared to agree that it is not always easy to taxonomize military action into that which is terroristic and that which is purely a military operation, we are left with doubts, for instance, about the bombing of Germany in 1942, 43, 44. Mm-hmm. You might contend that this was terroristic and unnecessary, and you might be right, although you're not a military expert, neither am I. But I
think there's a point to that.
Yeah, but I do judge that even if we all agree that what we did in Dresden was inexcusable, as a moral question, it's got to be understood in context of what was it that brought us to Dresden in the first instance.
Absolutely.
And what brought us to South Vietnam in the first instance, in my judgment, was clearly an uninterested, or I should say disinterested, concern for the stability and possibilities of a region of the world.
What period do you feel that we had this disinterested relationship to Vietnam?
Right now.
No, at what period did we have it? Did it begin? Let's say 1951, for example, when the State Department bulletin points out that we must help the French reconquer their former colony, and we must eradicate all Vietnamese resistance down to its last roots in order to reestablish the French in power. Was that disinterested?
To increase my vulnerability, I wish we had helped the French.
We did. We
but not
them.
Sufficiently. Not sufficiently.
Well, but
there's no point in helping somebody insufficiently.
It was hardly disinterested when we attempted, as you know, with tremendous support, in fact, to reinstate French imperialism in South Vietnam.
Now, it was disinterested in this sense, and I think this is an important distinction which you do touch on in your book. It's a disinterested act if my attempt to help, or your attempt to help a particular nation, is in order to spare you the possibility of a great ordeal in the future, which will harm you, your family, your children, your republic.
And in that sense, Nazi Germany was also disinterested.
Yeah,
after all, Nazi Germany was conquering Eastern Europe only in order to advance the values of Christian spiritual civilization and to restore the Slavs to their rightful home and so on and so forth. Totally disinterested.
Look, I follow you. I follow you. But if you want me to pursue that digression, I will.
Okay.
But let's suspend it for a moment. Okay. I'm distinguishing that kind of disinterestedness between the kind of...
but that's not a kind of disinterestedness. You see, that's something which includes as a special case every case of military aggression and colonialism in history. It's all disinterested in your sense.
Well, all right, let me simply rest my case by saying that there is an observable distinction by intelligent men between a country that reaches out and interferes with the affairs of another country because it has reason to believe that a failure to do so will result in universal misery, and that country which reaches out and interferes with another country because it wants to establish Coca-Cola plants there and chase national banks and whatever and exploit it. Now, that is an observable
It's a conceptual well, let's distinguish between a conceptual distinction and a factual
I'm prepared to do that.
All right, it is a conceptual distinction, but in actual fact, the history of colonialism shows that these two motivations can coincide. That is, practically every, I mean, there are exceptions, you know, probably the Belgians and the Congo are an exception, but by and large, the major imperialist ventures have been in the economic, in the material interest or in the perceived material interest.
I'm not interested in the mathematics of the, I'm interested,
let me finish.
You have already conceded that it's not merely a conceptual difference.
I say it is.
There are exceptions.
There are a few exceptions.
All right.
Like say
okay.
All
right, let's talk about the exceptions then.
Well, no, but the exceptions are at the difference. No, wait a minute. The exceptions, I mentioned, for example, the Belgians and the Congo. There they didn't even pretend to have a civilizing mission. There it was pure material self-interest. These are the exceptions. There are, as far as I know, no exceptions on the other side. There are, I mean, maybe I've left out a case of history, but as I see the history of colonialism, the great massive cases are cases where a powerful country was working in its perceived material self-interest and was covering what it was doing to itself and to the world with very pleasant phrases about preserving Christian values or helping the poor benighted natives or one thing or another.